Yo, yo, yo. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode, a fabulous episode of the Best Practices Show. And in this episode, I interview a good friend of mine, Fred Joyal, who has written many books. One of my favorite is Everything is Marketing. And I told Fred, I'm like, we got to do a show on contribution margin. Now, don't be worried if you don't know what that is, but it's one of the most single important things you'll ever learn about running a dental practice. And if you get it, you can play with the dials and understand how you can create a better practice and a better life. So I wanted to get the man on here and have him explain it in his very own words. And I hope you enjoy the episode. We'll see you soon. Here we go. Hey guys, welcome back to the Best Practices Show, where we take a look at the best business practices from the best dental practices all over. And I got a good friend of mine on. He's brilliant. He's crazy brilliant. Some of you already know this. Some of you have read his books. And today we're going to be talking about a very important concept called contribution margin. Now, if you're listening on the podcast and you don't know what that is, it's okay. I didn't either. Then I read the book and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. And I've used it ever since. It's truly one of the most important things you need to learn as a dentist, if you own your own practice, on understanding how things can get better for you over time. And it's with my good friend, Fred Joyal. Fred, thanks for being on, brother. Really appreciate you. And
excited to be here, Kirk, and talk about it. It doesn't sound interesting, but it's actually one of the most fascinating things about dentistry. It just has a funny name.
Yeah. And I would prep this by saying, I think I could talk to you about this issue alone for a good 2 hours, but we won't because we'll drown people out. We can always do a follow-up episode on this. But if you're, we have a lot of dental students. We've even got pre-dental students now listening, and I don't know how this works, but I'm having a lot of fun doing this. And if somebody doesn't know who Fred Joyal is, I always like a little bit of an intro so that they know who they're listening to. So who are you? What have you done in the past?
So many years ago, I started a company called 1-800-DENTIST, which became the largest referral service for dentists in the country. We spent $500 million in advertising over the time I was operating the company, which I sold the business about 5 years ago, and it went into decline because of it's a phone number. But for many, many years, we did a massive amount of television advertising. We were the loudest voice telling people to go to the dentist. I sent way many more people to the dentist who weren't my clients than my clients, because every dentist would come up and say, I love your ads. They remind my patients to come in. And so I learned a tremendous amount about how consumers thought about dentistry because we ran a live call center. We learned all of how they thought, how they made decisions, all their anxieties and trepidations about dentistry and misconceptions. And then I over the years, I met some really good dentists, some really good coaches for dentists, and every dentist should have a coach. Just as a side note, why you think you can run your business without coaching? Everybody who's good at anything has a good coach or a great coach. I have two, and I have friends who treat me like I'm a client because they're really candid with me about where I mess up. But I learned how dentists could succeed better with the patients we gave them.
Yeah,
which was by understanding first that everything they do in the practice either increases or decreases case acceptance. So I wrote a book about that called Everything is Marketing. And then I wrote a second book about how important it is to generate word of mouth digitally, and it's called Becoming Remarkable. So I took all of that knowledge, put it into books, lecture on it, and it really helped dentists to turn the potential patients I sent them into real patients and to increase the production in their practice with their existing patients and attract new patients a half a dozen ways or a dozen ways.
Yeah.
So I developed a massive body of knowledge about dental consumer behavior and also successful practice behavior.
Yeah, and I love it. Now, so if you're listening, I'm a book snob. I just am, and I'm just going to call it out. I read a lot of books. I love books, but there are books that you read and you're like, I don't know, that was okay. There are books that you read and you're going, oh my gosh, I learned so much. So if you're listening, it's non-negotiable. Of the books, if you're going to be a dentist, on the short list, if I was to only give you 5 for your entire career, one of them would be Everything is Marketing. Now, I'll tell you why. Because when I read it, Fred, I didn't know you. And I was like, okay, this is the 1-800-DENTIST guy. And then every chapter, I wish I could show you my copy. I was writing on almost every page going, this is so well said. And there are concepts in there that you're like, you're not one of those people that adds like paragraph after paragraph to make your point. You're going to make the point and go on and then you illustrate. And today we're going to be talking about contribution margin. And when I saw that, you actually have a graph in it, and it hit me right in the heart. I was like, wow, this is right on the money. So let's talk about that. So, and I actually mentioned this to you before we go live. I actually could pick something in every chapter and we could do a whole episode. Today we're going to talk about contribution margin, but I want you to describe it. What is it, Fred? How can I even get my brain around it as a dentist?
All right, so I try to make it as simple as possible to understand. And it's basically about the profitability of dentistry as an enterprise. And you have to understand that most businesses, as they increase their revenue, their profit often decreases, but normally it stays very static. It doesn't change directions. Like if they go from making $5 million a year to $20 million a year, their profitability, their percentage of profit doesn't increase. And I love using the example of a supermarket just so people understand how a lot of businesses operate. Supermarkets operate at a 3% profit margin.
Wow.
So they have to sell $33 million of groceries to make $1 million of profit. There's competition everywhere. Think about the inventory. Think about the waste. Think about the shoplifting. Think about the unions. All of these things that they have to deal with. And all they're going to make is 3%, no matter how big they get. If they move it to 3.3%, they're ecstatic.
Right.
Dentistry is completely different as a business model because it has very unique structure, which is it has what you would say a large percentage of fixed costs versus variable costs.
Yeah.
In other words, rent, leases, equipment purchases, supplies, and labs and employees. Those are all pretty much fixed. The variable costs are consumables and lab.
Right.
And so what happens is when the term is when you crack your nut, when you beat your overhead in the month, suddenly every dollar you earn after that, you make about 80% profit.
Yeah.
Because all you have is labs and consumables against it.
Yeah. Now let's break this down so that if you're a dentist and you're listening, now think about this. Your rent doesn't go up when you produce and collect more. It stabilizes, right? And then there are other costs that don't skyrocket with the collections. For instance, even supplies, they might go up a little bit, but they're not going to go up the same extent as your collections, right? That's what you're talking. This is where you see fixed and variable costs really come alive once you hit this economy. You've heard it said, economies of scale, but like for a dentist, it's the reverse. You actually make more once you get beyond this threshold.
And technically, you don't need more employees
Right.
until your schedule's full. And very seldom is your schedule. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to fill your schedule, and then you're going to add an employee, which may add 10% to the cost. So what I say is, once you beat your overhead, conservatively, every dollar that you produce in a practice is a 70% profit dollar. Now, the reason most dentists don't know this is this generally happens at what number? At what number are they beating their overhead comfortably in a month?
Yeah. And so this is a great question, because that was where I was going to go next. Now, it really depends on how much you sign up for. I mean, if you're a dentist that went all in on building your own facility and you got a saltwater fish tank and all that stuff, and you bought a CBCT before you have your first patient, that's going to be significantly different. But some of you listening went the simple route. You bought an existing practice that was actually a really good practice, and it was simple. It was 4 operatories with a good team and a good, or you did a scratch start and you just kept it simple. And usually, like we have found, this has been my research and it's limited, only 20, but right around the $750,000 mark, you kind of got to get over that mark first. I'm always curious when a dentist has been practicing for 10 years and they haven't been able to cross the 750,000. You should be able to do that without any business knowledge whatsoever if you just take good care of people. If you don't, there's usually something else that's limiting that growth. But once you get to 750, 850, then right around the $1 million mark, it's not only a badge for a business owner, because very few businesses ever get to $1 million. It's something you can celebrate, but it's also a good vantage point to be able to say, wow, we've come some ways. And you now have to think better. It's not like, oh, wow, let's just keep ramping it up. Some people do, but I've found in that sweet spot of 850 to 1, and then definitely about 1.2, dentists start to say, okay, I can cut back the Friday. I can start taking a few courses. I could probably pay myself a little bit more. I'm ahead of the tax thing. I can start investing in the future. What's been your findings on that?
So the average dentist is producing 500,000 or 600,000 if you look nationwide. Now it's going to vary in the big cities.
Is that just
So
the dentist production or practice production? That's not practice production.
That's the practice production. Yeah,
really?
I mean,
okay.
The average dentist is only, it's rare. I mean, they're gradually moving up. But look at, I mean, when you do a crown in LA, you get $1,500. When you do it in St. Louis, you get $800. That's a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's it's easy to produce $1 million in California, but it doesn't change your how much you make, because your rent is higher. Everything is considerably higher here. They're just as a sidebar, we get dentists paying hygienists $100 an hour right now because there's such a shortage. That's a whole other discussion. But dentists don't experience the contribution margin advantage because they're stuck at that level, whatever you say, to 750 or something like that. So they say, oh no, if anything I do, my profitability is only 30%.
Mm-hmm.
And for them it is, because somehow they never break through. But the idea is, at 750, you've paid your employees, you're paying yourself, 60 grand a month or something like that, or whatever, or you're paying yourself. So, and that's all you're doing, is you're paying yourself, you're paying your team, you're paying all your fixed costs and all your variable costs. The next 100 that you make, it goes right in, because you don't have to add any staff. That next 100, 70 grand of it's yours.
Yeah, that's
in
great.
Profit. There's no expense against it, and then you can keep doing that indefinitely. $1.5 million, $2 million. What's going to happen is your costs are going to go up, but they're going to be disproportionately low relative to other businesses, because your fixed costs are covered.
Right.
That your fixed cost, which is a huge percentage. So your payroll is going to go up, your supplies are going to go up, your labs are going to go up. But suddenly if you're operating with the second half of your income at a 70% profit margin, now what can you do? Add technology
Yep.
that makes you more efficient, chair to chair, getting the patients in and out. You can advertise, so now you're spiraling up. You're attracting more patients because you have the money to promote yourself. You can bid more on Google. You can do all of those things because you've got the extra cash. So you just keep pushing the value of your business up to the point you'll hit another set point, but it'll be $1.5 million,
Right.
of which you're taking 30 something percent of that home after you pay yourself.
Right. Right. Now I love this because this is a great point to like pause and understand. When you talk about set points, they always say this, it's not the money that matters. People always say, millionaires, it's not the money that matters. It's the lessons they've learned in order to save those millions. And the same thing applies to running a business. It's exactly what Fred has mentioned, but you learn lessons along the way. One of them that we've observed, if you're a dentist listening, you know how this works, is you get to a certain point where you've collected $1 million and you're like, now I need to put some systems in place. I don't need 4 people at the front. We could probably do this with 3 people at the front, and let's streamline our systems. That's what great businesses have learned at a certain level is like Starbucks can afford to pay full-time benefits on part-time employment, not because for a lot of different reasons, but their systems are airtight and their collections per square foot in their stores are among the highest in the United States. And so some of these principles apply to you. You can actually understand a few things when you get to $1 million or 1.2 million. You're starting to think, oh gosh, 33% team compensation is not a healthy range because that doesn't leave anything left over. I got to get to the 25% range. It's not about paying people less. It's about paying them well and having really good systems so you don't have to touch things 9 times. You've also understood the value of what you do, and you've maybe raised your fees a little bit. You've also understand you just can't slam crowns into the schedule at any point for any reason. You're now starting to schedule. So there's lessons along this way that you're like, okay, I've learned how to do this a little bit better. And at these sweet spots, Fred, it's important to take a breath because you got to know who you are because some people are like, oh, now I'll just go to 2.2, 2.3. I always tell dentists, and when it comes to contribution margin, once you get through that valley and you're in a point where you're like, I'm making actually pretty good money. Now you've got to do some self-awareness because 2.2 million is not for everybody. That's a lot of teeth. And some dentists don't like playing well with other dentists. So the idea of getting another dentist and another dentist and another dentist is not a great idea for them. For some people it is. What's been your learning as they get through those valleys?
One of the things that they figure out is when they understand contribution margin is they help the team to understand it by saying, look, we do 750. If we do 850 next year, bonuses.
Yeah.
That and in this market where it is so hard to attract and keep people, remember when you make 30, 40, $50,000 a year, $1,000 a month is huge.
Right.
500 a month means a new car versus a used car, versus it means savings versus 2 paychecks away from bankruptcy. So it's really important to understand that bonuses work, but you have to lay out the expectation, which is, in your head, I have to get above 750.
Right.
Now I can, and so everybody has to understand it and say, we are going into real profitability at 750. So we're going to look at our months and say, we got to hit 60 plus. We got to produce 60 plus a month. And the goal is to produce 100.
Right.
And the more we do, and we can't do what most businesses do, which is just keep stacking the people on, because that reaches inefficiency. This is the other thing to understand about most businesses, and the data is vast on that, is the bigger they get, the more their profit shrinks.
Whoa. Okay.
So they could be, they start making, they'll start a business and they'll be once it's profitable and it's going along, they'll be at a 20% profit margin with 15 or 20 people.
Yeah.
They add 50 more people, they add 100 more people. Suddenly the profit margin 8, because there's a natural inefficiency to adding people. You need layers of management, and everybody's getting paid to not produce the end product.
Right.
And so dentistry is not really like that, because the other businesses don't have contribution margin to cover a vast number of extra employees. Dentistry does, but dentists also have to be mindful of, like, let's not just isolate tasks to more and more individuals and keep adding them, because there is an inefficiency to a bloated staff.
Yeah, it's so true.
And when you solve that, when you are aware of that and go, I'm not gonna, because the team will always go, we need another person. We need another person.
Yeah.
Except the hygienist, they go, we need one less hygienist.
Yeah.
Right?
Now,
so
I want to back up on what you said, because it's so true. You guys, this is why Fred's so important. Like, if it's a regular business, there's actually been many books written on this. First thing to understand that anyone's ever been above $3 million is, growth sucks cash. You need cash once you get past 3 million. It's not like, oh, I'm going to buy a boat, I'm going to buy another thing. That does happen, but you need cash to sustain that growth. There's also been books written on this, which I didn't know. There's something called no man's land. There are very few businesses in the United States that survive beyond 3 million. And you can just read the book. I'm actually going to get the author on, and he explains why. And it's exactly what you said, Fred. What you knew before doesn't sustain what you're building now, and you need better thinking. You need to develop leaders. You need better cash management strategies. And those are all really good challenges. But if you're a dentist, the cool thing about being a dentist is you can reach these certain thresholds with contribution margin and get to 1.2. Now you've got choices. You don't have to add 7 more ops and sign up for more insurances. You could say, hey, listen, I've got choices here. And I always tell people this, like, if you're a multi-doc doc, great, go for it, but you at least know who you are. There's a certain point where you get to 1.6 million in collections and you're keeping pretty close to half of it, or maybe a little less than half of it. That's about all you're going to make in a good environment as a dentist, unless you change the business model completely. And listen, the government's going to take 37 to 41% of it anyway at some certain point. So everybody's got to ask themselves, like, is this amount of money enough? And if you're a dentist listening and $800,000 isn't enough to fuel your lifestyle, that's another question that we can't answer. That's a whole nother thing, is that there's only, and I have found this, that it's great to make money. I think everybody should set a goal as making money, but you reach a certain point where no additional money brings any additional happiness. It's just an accounting measure. So this is a really important concept for dentists to understand, contribution margin, because it works in your favor. And then asking really good questions at these vantage points, like, do I want to go farther? Much farther should I go? And is this going to take more time from me? I think time is the new rich. I'm 51. I'm playing the back nine of my life. It's not about money now. It's about time, So it's just really important when you understand these contribution margins. What are some of the contribution margin errors that you see that dentists make that you've seen for a while when it comes to this concept?
The one other way that you leverage contribution margin is if you've got a facility. Facilities now are very tech heavy,
Right.
and they're high production. If you've got cone beam and CEREC and lasers in the facility, you are a fully digital environment. You can really produce. You can do a single tooth implant in an hour and get $25,000 to $3,000 for that. So, but the other thing that, again, we're looking at fixed versus variable costs. If you say, well, I'm going to open another office, before you've doubled your hours in that facility, because you got $1 million facility that you're doing 35, 40 hours a week of dentistry or less in, you need to add an associate. So, and that associate works different hours than you. And there's all sorts of people that want a variable lifestyle. I remember this amazing example. 2 dentists came out of University of the Pacific.
Okay.
opened a shop in San Francisco, scratch practice. They worked opposing shifts, 12-hour days, 5 days a week. She worked 7 to 1. He worked 1 to 7. And they used the facility. So now the facility's open 60 hours a week. But they had early morning hours. They had evening hours. They always had a dentist there 12 hours a day. So the facility cost relative to what they were earning had shrunk because they were using it for 60 hours.
Yeah.
And they were Tuesday to Saturday. Those were the hours. And he loved it because he loved to go skiing. So he could ski. He could take Sunday and Monday to ski and show up Tuesday at 1. So he's coming back from the slopes Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
So he already had his whole lifestyle design was working. He's a year out of school.
Yeah.
And the practice was in a year with no advertising was full.
Yeah.
Just because of the hours, the convenience. Convenience is one of the best marketing strategies there is. And it beats your overhead even more because you're maximizing the facility instead of opening another practice.
Right. Now I want to go back to what you said, because what you said is absolutely brilliant. It's not so much the what, it's the why behind what they did. It's they designed their lives first. So please don't hear this if you're listening like, oh, you got to be open till 7 p.m. That's not what we're saying. What Fred is describing is like the more production you have on these fixed costs, the more profit you ultimately have. And I think the most valuable thing he said is like, here's the cool thing. For the most part, most of you are listening. This is the United States. There's no rules. You can do anything as a dentist. If you want to work 7 to 3 without a lunch, you can. If you want to work 1 to 7 and ski all day, you can. I know a rock climber, and he likes climbing rock in the afternoon. So he does 6 to 2 every day. I'm like, does it work? He goes, beautifully. I'm like, awesome. The cool thing is that once you figure out who you want to be and you understand contribution margin, you can lend yourself to a great life. This is awesome stuff. What other lessons would you say on this? Okay, so the lab thing always comes up. People are like, well, even the lab thing, there's a certain amount. That's going to be one of those costs that will grow with but not so much anymore. Like that's even changed a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you've brought CEREC into your practice, you have cut your lab cost significantly. Yeah. And even more, the more you do, the more it cuts your percentage of lab costs, the more blocks you mill yourself, because you've gone from, producing 700,000 to 1 million, you're milling 80% of your blocks or 70% of your blocks instead of them going to the lab. Your lab cost goes from 6 or 7% of your costs down to 3 or 4% of your costs, or less. It's anteriors, it's full, veneer restorative cases. And the technology is there. Anybody who thinks that CEREC technology, I could use a CEREC machine. I could do it. You give me a cone beam and a CEREC machine and a blindfold, and I can put in a single tooth implant. Okay, yeah. The technology is there.
That's what we're going to do one show, and we're actually going to have you do it. But it might have to be on not a human, but it would be on like a.
Well, no, we'll do it over. We'll do it in Mexico.
There you go. Like we'll do it. We'll do it on a like a. I don't know. We'll do it. We'll do it in a mock setting first.
We'll do it offshore in a boat where there's no, beyond the no maritime laws.
Hey,
you don't need a license.
Hey, Fred. Remember, my 94-year-old grandmother listens to this, so she's keeping me on the rails here. But you're pointing out another thing that stimulates a thought in my brain is like not only that, what you said is absolutely true. The more you develop your brain as a dentist, not necessarily your hands. Those are important too, but like a lot of dentists doing great advancements in composite work now. The old days, you used to have to trim down a lot of tooth structure in order to make money in dentistry or create a lot of value. And now dentists understand, hey, listen, patients are coming in here for a result. It's not how much tooth dust I create every day. So when you consider that in contribution margin, and we've had some great docs on here that are, some of their composite work is the most beautiful work I've ever seen. And they actually preserve tooth structure. And I always ask them, like, do you charge less for that? They go, no, like it's been a lifetime to learn how to do this and make it look like this. And the patients appreciate that. And so I think the important thing listening is that you got to look at everything on the table. What Fred is saying is absolutely true. And it's an important piece of keeping your sanity in dentistry. And then think about how you could advance your team, like sending your team to a great training on how to take photography. CEREC, that's a great one. I have a lot of teams we coach. The first purchase they make after buying a machine like that is to send their team to Scottsdale or wherever for training, because now they can take a tool like that and the utilization goes through the roof. So there's other ways you can add to the contribution margin as we look further down the road, right?
Yeah, and training is certainly one of them, because the other way you retain employees is you make the job more interesting by giving them growth. People want impact, they want purpose, and they want growth. They want money, but all of those factors fit in. And once they get more comfortable with money, now the purpose is built in. You're helping people in the most profound way when you convince them to take care of their teeth. But when you send your team off and they all learn to do all of the other, they do the scanning, they do the milling, they test the crown. Basically, a general rule with CEREC and anything is you shouldn't do anything that doesn't require your license to do.
Agreed.
Somebody else should be doing it.
Yeah.
And you should be just moving through that, talking to the patient, telling them what you're going to do, getting it done, walk out of that room and get in the next room and let the assistant scan that crown, go over, she mills it, she brings it in, she fits it, she adjusts it, she calls you in to seat it.
I love what you're saying.
How long does that take?
I'm totally picking up what you're putting down. Now, I'll add another layer to what you said because it's brilliant, Fred. I had a friend of mine say this to me not too long ago, like, you're not really a great leader until you develop other great leaders. And I was like, wow, that hit me spot on, because as a lot of times when you're running a business, you're trying to do it all yourself. You're trying to grow your skills. Those are all important. But the day changes for you when you start to develop another team member and they do it better than you do. And it frees up your time to do only what you are licensed to do, which I absolutely love. Now, the whole essence of this show, if you're new to showing up to the show, is our job is to make your life a little bit better every time. As a dentist, keep showing up. I hope you get a little snippet because it makes your life better and your practice better. But Fred, what are some of the warning signs? Like, you've seen a lot of people in dentistry. When it comes to money or contribution margin in a dental practice, if I'm a young dentist listening, what would you say? Don't do this. What are some of the warning signs you would say?
Learn to meter out your lifestyle. If you could only understand what it took me and most people who are successful and made a bunch of money know, is that after about $150,000 of income, all the other stuff you buy makes you about this much happier. Okay.
It's true.
But you keep shoveling the money at it, and you realize that I had a friend of mine. He said, I have to have a pool. I need a house with a pool, and he eventually calculated that the swims were costing him $1,000 a piece, because that's how seldom he swam versus taking care of the pool. And you buy stuff. There's very little difference between $100,000 car and a $50,000 car. Very little, except the number of speeding tickets you get. And so I've had all sorts of cars over the years, really, and enjoyed them. I drive a Honda now because I don't care. I've had it. I didn't make. What transformed me is I had a Jaguar convertible, which was essentially a two-seater, and I had to buy a Prius so I could take people anywhere and also put stuff in a car as a second car. The Jaguar lease ran out. I gave it back. I ended up driving the Prius for 5 years because I just didn't care anymore.
Yeah.
It's like I enjoyed the Jaguar, but I don't need another $1,500 a month lease. For the joy wasn't there. I extracted the joy. And so the quicker you move to a point where making a difference in the lives of people around you is where you get your fulfillment, the less crap you need to buy.
I love it. I love it. That is so spot on. And everybody's in a different place with this journey, but then you also start doing the math on your life and you're like, some people call it over the hill, midlife crisis, whatever it is, back nine. You realize like the sand in the hourglass is lighter up top than it is below. And you're like, whoa, now I don't need stuff. Now I need like the relationships matter, the days matter and all that stuff. And so the coolest thing about this great profession is it's so cool you can make the rules. And so any last thoughts you have on contribution card? Because again, I'll beat the drum on this one, Fred. You articulated this concept and I'll say it a million times. We're going to put it in the show notes. You got to read this book. You got to understand contribution margin because when you understand it, you can play with these dials and you can figure out exactly on the map where you want to be for the most part. Any last thoughts you have on contribution margin?
There was a study done on the profitability of industries, and dentistry was rated the most profitable industry in the country.
Really? Number one?
And so if that's number one, now if that's not happening for you, you just need help. Mm-hmm. It is there for you. You do not have to figure out how to do that. The beauty is, and I remind people of this, they call you're an entrepreneur, you started your own business. No, an entrepreneur has to invent the business from scratch. Dentistry done extremely well, extremely profitably, extremely enjoyably, and in an incredibly satisfying way is being done 10,000 times over across the country. All you have to do is emulate that, learn how to do that, which is great. It's all there for you, and it can be an incredibly abundant lifestyle. The other thing about contribution margin, as you said, is you can control your hours. You can say, look, I want to work 3 out of 4 weeks. I want a week off every month. Mm-hmm. And you probably need an associate, but that's only probably. You can schedule stuff accordingly and create the lifestyle that works for you that you can do indefinitely.
Yeah. Amen, brother. That is so well said. And if you're a dentist listening, you're like, you don't understand, this is hard. Listen, very few dentists have ever gone out of business. Very few. If they do, it's usually something silly. You're in a great industry. And what Fred has said is absolutely true. You can play with the dials. I got a dentist here in Milwaukee. He's actually going to Florida like every month now, trying to figure out like, how do I continue to make this work? And like, he's a perfect example of what you're talking about. So Fred, thank you so much for being on. Again, get his books. If you've ever seen Fred speak, make sure you see him speak. And then where else can I find you, Fred? If I'm listening, and I've never heard you before.
The easiest thing to do is go to fredjoyal.com, Joyal, no dashes or dots or anything like that. And, or follow me on Facebook or LinkedIn. I'm also Fred Joyal. My name is the handle everywhere. The handle is the term. I'd love to hear from you. It's the best place to buy the books is fredjoyal.com. You can learn about my new book, which is How to Cultivate the Superpower of Boldness, which we talked about on a previous podcast with Kirk. So just if you want to learn about that, listen to that podcast. But all you really need to do is maintain this mindset that what you do is one of the best investments people can make. When you understand and that truth and your team understands that and communicates that, you're unstoppable in this fabulous profession.
Yeah, let me piggyback on that because I actually stole this straight from your book. And it says it, I don't know if it's chapter 1 or chapter 2, dentistry is one of the best investments a human being can make. Now that is powerful. I believe that. I hope you, if you're listening, you believe that as a dentist, and also your team believes it, then you're off to a great start in dentistry. And now you won't undervalue what you do for the rest of your career. Neither will your team. And your team will look at a patient and say, Mrs. Jones, this is a fabulous investment. And you're going to be so happy you did it. And they won't be faking it because their eyes will tell the truth. So Fred, brilliant stuff, man. You and I are going to do many more of these as we get going. So stick around while we say goodbye to everybody else. But thank you guys for listening to the Best Practices Show. Hey, if you enjoyed today, do us a favor, just hit the share button. I'd always love to hear from you as far as things that you want to hear from, whether it be Fred or other guests. And until we see you guys next time, or we hear from you guys next time, keep watching the Best Practices Show. You guys enjoy the rest of your day.